Join me now from Washington, D.C., constitutional law attorney and senior legal advisor for the Trump campaign, Jenna Ellis. Jenna, thank you so much for joining me. Jenna, what is President Trump's path to victory at this point?
Well, Stephanie, there are multiple paths to victory because let's remember that there are still 6 states that are in play. And so neither candidate has reached the number 270 for electoral college votes, and no states have yet been certified. And so President Trump is fighting for free and fair elections and to make sure that the process is counted fairly and that every legal vote is counted fairly and accurately. So what our lawsuits are pushing for is to make sure that recounts in states happen where, like Wisconsin and Georgia, where that needs to happen, and then also in Michigan and Pennsylvania, that those states do not certify the results until we know that those results are not false or fraudulent. So this is not just about the path to victory for President Trump. It's about restoring confidence in our election system, the legitimacy of the outcome, and making sure that the result is fair and accurate.
What do you think Trump's strongest case will be? Like which state specifically?
Well, Pennsylvania right now is an absolute disaster. So if you look at not only the reports of irregularities, you look at the reports of the election officials that have all of these irregularities and unlawful orders that they're following from election officials there. And you also look at how the state itself not only changed their election law several times before the election, which they can't do. The state legislature did not act in that state. And so we won a significant victory yesterday in Pennsylvania where the judge agreed that the Secretary of State cannot tell her election officials to do anything through the process that is not according to Pennsylvania state law. So there, I think that has been a great indication that the judicial branch is going to make sure that the law is followed in each state and that the results are free and fair.
When it comes to poll watchers who were denied, how many cases of this has the Trump campaign seen? I believe people have been emailing and calling and letting the Trump campaign know their personal experience.
Yeah, so we're receiving just a shocking amount of reports. We're still looking through those, but we definitely have reports that are really significant out of Georgia, out of Pennsylvania, out of Arizona, out of Nevada, out of Michigan. And so we've already filed in Michigan and Pennsylvania about meaningful access. And, you know, the mainstream media wants to push back and say, well, there was a non-zero number of poll watchers. Well, that non-zero number, okay, if you only have 1 or 2 people that are 100 feet away and they're not actually able to observe what's going on, that is not according to the state law. And so that's why our lawsuits use this phrase meaningful access to make sure that all of our poll watchers are able to actually observe and see the ballot counts. That's the intention of the law. That's what needs to be followed. That was also a victory in Pennsylvania where the court said, yes, of course you can have meaningful access. And that was a court order. And Pennsylvania so far has failed to follow that order.
Yeah. When it comes to dead people voting, obviously, we've seen several examples of this. What do you think the tally or the actual number is, and how does this even happen?
Yeah, well, it happens, of course, by the election officials not following the protocols for ballots and not following the law. And so when they are accepting ballots that have been mailed in that don't have signature matching, when they're not looking and comparing against the current voter roll, when they're not purging the voter rolls before elections, there are many different ways that this kind of thing can happen. And so what we're trying to discover, I mean, it's been a week since Election Day, we are trying to discover the numbers, and we have to have some time to do that, and that's why not certifying the election results in states like Nevada and Michigan and Pennsylvania and the recounts in Wisconsin and Georgia. All of this needs to be done fairly, and people need to expect and understand that this will take a little bit of time. And the mainstream media is just wanting to coronate Joe Biden, push this through, ignore the legal challenges, ignore all of these instances of irregularities and outright fraud that is occurring. And they just want to say, well, it doesn't matter. It's not significant enough. It's not widespread enough. And my question to them is, well, how much fraud is okay with you? And if this is outcome determinative, we just want to make sure that every legal vote counts. And Joe Biden and the Democrats have not come forward and said that they agree with the law and that they agree that this needs to be a fair and legitimate process.
Yeah, it's interesting how the media are handling this. They're saying, oh, well, you know, there's just a few cases. Don't worry about it. You know, this isn't really widespread. But they don't even want any sort of investigation. They don't want the Trump campaign to actually look into the, the actual potential voter fraud that's happened. I mean, there's obviously voter fraud, but like they don't want people to dig into it. And so they're ready. They're moving forward with the Biden transition. You look at the news coverage. They're already deciding looking at who Biden might pick for his cabinet, and they're just going forward. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, what are they so afraid of? Why not have transparency? That's why the law protects meaningful access for both parties and make sure that we get to that free and fair result. And so, recounts and lawsuits, this is not unprecedented. That's why typically states have 2 weeks to certify those results so that any recounts can happen if you're within the margin of a legally mandated recount, or if there are those challenges. And so when they're just ignoring this and they're just pretending, first of all, the mainstream media said there is no fraud, and now they have to pivot and say, well, there's no widespread fraud. They keep moving the goalposts and they keep wanting to minimize this. But the truth of the matter is that this investigation is critical not only to this election result, but also to every election in the future. If any fraud gets through the system, if any of the state election officials can simply change the law and process according to their whim, then the American people can't have confidence of free and fair election results. And that's why this matters very significantly to the future of our nation.
Yeah, and you hear some of the Democrats and people in the media, the talking heads, they're like, oh, well, Trump's just a sore loser. The campaign, they need to like pack up and go home. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you believe the polling, and this number is probably higher, 70% of Republicans don't believe there was a free and fair election. And it is very important that if for some reason it is Biden who's the next president of the United States, they have to assure people that this was a free and fair election.
Absolutely. And, for the at least 71 million Americans that voted for President Trump, they are willing to see this process through. And they are very frustrated that the Democrats and the mainstream media are not legitimizing in the media this process, and that there is no certification of results yet. But you know what? Not one American on the Trump side or any of the conservatives or the Republicans are going and looting and rioting and burning down cities. They're waiting on the process. This is how America works. This is how we function. We have to make sure that the law prevails. We are a nation of rules, not a nation of rulers. And last time I checked, no one in the mainstream media has given up their anchor position, their contributor position, and gone on the federal bench in Michigan or Pennsylvania. And so until they're actually the judge and the adjudicator of these lawsuits, then their opinion does not matter. They cannot simply declare Joe Biden the president and ignore the fact that we have a process of rules, and we are a nation under the U.S. Constitution in America.
All good points, Jenna. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Stephanie.